Much has changed in our absence, it seems, the former heir said jovially.
Lord. Valerian blinked for a moment, baffled.
Daemon handed him the letter. And his eyes grew most wide indeed.
Your son has gone mad.
Perhaps. He shrugged one shoulder. One of us often does. However, something rumbled above. It was their one, and only warning. A mighty shadow swooped down out the clouds over them. No, not just one shadow. More. Dark wings blotted out the very skies. The silence that followed was a beauty, a blessed thing indeed. He resolved himself to savor it as long as he could.
Valerian the Black Dread had come to the stepstones in all his wild vigor, but not alone.
And there, riding upon his back.
Ha! The boy did so love his entrances. The earth shook as the massive dragon landed, causing many to stumble about as if they had been in their cup.
My, how he'd grown. A curious pang tugged at his heart. Was this what pride felt like? Pride in his own blood. It had been years, since he'd felt this stirring in his chest. Brave of you, boy, but foolish. He grinned at his son as he disembarked. I thought you would have learned your lesson by now. What can I say? Naruto's smile was shameless. I've always been a slow learner.
You and I were not made for peace. We were made for war.
It is in our blood. And the blood of the dragon runs thick. Let us show them.
Dread.
Doom of the stepstone.
Ready X the day before. King's Landing. Ow. Executi.
Steel flashed through the darkness of the hand's tower, and Otto stiffened, and then he felt it push up against his throat, and unconsciously a hand flew to his throat. What is this?
He turned. And saw them.
There were 4 of them that he could see, each shrouded under cloak, and worse, they each had masks depicting a different type of emotion: joy, sorrow, anger, annoyance, and they had covered their necks, arms and hands, legs and feet fully, meaning he couldn't discern their identities even if he wanted to try, but he recognized them all the same. We are here to tell you something of importance, what we want you to do, and if left incomplete, means that you pay the price in your blood. A voice spoke. And what would the Brotherhood want with me? I have yet to do anything to earn the ire of you and yours. Otto stated. The prince oversteps himself. Make sure he knows that when you see him next. Another commented. After all, it wouldn't do for the crown heir to meet an untimely end, would it? Not with you trying to secure the throne through your own child. One of the left ones spoke.
My daughter is only doing what she thinks is best. You know not which monster you prod with your actions. Otto responded with narrowed gaze.
We know enough, but what can you say when you live around those who proclaim themselves gods? Another masked man scoffed. This is your one and only warning, Hand of the King, overstep yourself, and this dynasty will not live past the current generation. And who is to say what would become of your grandchild? Watch yourself, Hightower, and know we will return if you allow these would-be kings to run amok. Another sneered, and with a pellet of smoke dropped, the group vanished. Otto growled to himself. They would be back. Those who thought themselves untouchable would always return to finish what they started. He would need to inform Naruto of these masked men, so as to make sure that if something were to begin happening, then they would have a way to counter their actions. The House of the Dragon could not divide itself. Not when everything was good in the realm. Peace would prevail. It had to. Otto. A voice called out, drawing his attention where he sighed to himself. He would bring this issue up later. Right now he had other things to worry about.
Ah, Lady Rhaenyra. How may I help you this evening? He questioned cordially. Have you seen my cousin? The princess asked.
Oh, apologies, princess, but Naruto and Valerian headed out to the stepstones. They are hoping to end the fighting there all the sooner. He responded.
The stepstones are an ocean away. It would take a day's ride on dragon to reach it. Even Valerian would need to rest. she remarked. Valerian is much larger than any dragon. He could make the trip in a few hours, Majesty. Otto told her he has been seen crossing the waters between here and Dragonstone in minutes, something that takes a dragon the size of Caraxes an hour to accomplish. Otto said wearily.
Yes, I see. Apologies for interrupting your evening. She muttered solemnly to her father's right hand. I had wished to speak with him, but I guess it will have to wait. Again, I apologize. Otto bowed his head. When Rhaenyra departed, Otto narrowed his eyes. It was no coincidence that she had shown up moments after he was stalked and threatened in such a manner, and he would make sure that this scheme she was plotting would not bear fruit. The whole situation of it smelled of treachery. Naruto stood between his father and Lord Curlis, his cousin next to him. So, what has been happening in the war? How many have you lost? He questioned.
5,000 of my men are out there in the freezing mud. 3,000 of them are bloodied and cleaved. 2,000 will never leave this place. Corley stated with a weary sigh. I will not believe they fought and died for nothing while the remaining 5,000 fight for their lives.
They won't have to die if this plan goes accordingly. Naruto said as he looked to Rhaenyra. Cousin, you say these enemy fighters like to scurry and hide in the caverns whenever they spot your father on Dragonback? He questioned. Rhaenyra nodded his head. Indeed, we've tried burning them out using both Caraxes and sea smoke, but their flames cannot produce the needed casualty, the crab feeder. He told him. Leave that to me, Naruto said as he looked to his father. Valerian and I can burn the entire cliff to molten slag if you need us. We are here to help finish this farce of a war against the Triarchy, not extend it and end more lives than we have already sacrificed. He told him. You plan on using the night to your advantage? Demon questioned. But what can your dragon accomplish that the both of mine and Rhaenyra's has not? He demanded.
Simple, Valerian can eradicate the entire forest under darkness without being spotted. Naruto answered. His flames are as black as dragon glass, and when he glides you don't hear him until he wants to be heard. For all his size, Valerian is quite easily the greatest asset at your disposal. He told the former heir. And that's not mentioning the terror he inspires when he swims through the water. He smirked.
Dragons don't swim, they die from drowning. The sea snake shook his head.
You would be surprised, Naruto said with a look that said he knew what he was speaking about. Valerian slaughtered 8 whale pods within a month of returning to King's Landing. The small folk have never eaten so well in the last year, as they have since his return. Unleash him upon the Triarchy's fleet, and they wouldn't even be able to counter him. Naruto told the sea snake. He's probably far more lethal in the water than the sky, if I were to be frank. He hummed.
And how would you give commands when you can barely hold your breath for a couple minutes? Damien snorted. It's a good idea, for a child. He told his son with a shake of his head. Naruto only smirked. Trust me, Valerian can hear my words better than any animal. He told him, he'd follow the commands. He stated seriously. Very well then, we will use this to our advantage. Lord Curlis nodded with a stiff agreement. We strike down the fleet followed by a night raid of fire and blood. He said as he moved pieces of the map around. Caraxes and Seasmoke can take the western and eastern sects of the battlefield, and Valerian himself can cover the north and south in a crossing motion. The 3 of them can fly through the air before passing the others and coat the land beneath in a blaze of destruction that will force the enemy to retreat back to the cove where they will meet up with us lying in wait for them to flee on ship. That is where Valerian will dive into the water and take the fight to their fleet and destroy it.
It is a sound plan, but you forget my son is abroad on Dragonback. He will have to dismount and give away his position. He told the sea snake.
Not if he dismounts at the northernmost sect. We can have a horse and 1,000 men there waiting for him to arrive while Valerian glides towards the water in the south. Lord Curlis said as he looked to the crown prince who nodded in agreement. It's the perfect ambush, Rhaenyra stated with a nod, and 3 dragons are better than 2, and using this we can cover more ground this way. He agreed with his father. Alright, fine, but if my son dies, then there will be issues. Daemon stated. You do realize that I am standing right here, I can hear you just fine. Naruto sighed, and if I die, then I die. This means Rhaenyra will take the throne as heir if I do not have a son at the time, he tells them. You have something you wish to say? Daemon quirked a brow. Yay, congratulations, you're a soon-to-be grandfather now. Naruto stated before he walked. Daemon blinked before he shook his head and turned to his son as he walked. Whoa, hold on a goddamned moment, you can't just say that and suddenly walk away. He called out.
Can have did, his son declared. Suck it, old man. Valaran was ancient. He took great pride in that. After all, 'twas he who had seen the doom of old Valeria long ago. With age came wisdom, and with wisdom, experience.
But were it not for the Golden One giving up his own life to bolster his, he would have died long ago. He had missed him immensely, and upon encountering his reincarnation in King's Landing, he had sworn to serve him until the last breath of life left his lungs. Now that they were reunited, nothing could stand against them.
Certainly not a rabble of reavers and slavers.
Aegon the Conqueror, Aegon, his old friend whom he would remember until his dying breath, was never one for naval combat. There had never been a need, they simply burned everything from above. Such was their right and their way. Aegon had been strong, not at all like that weakling Viserys. But tonight, the element of surprise was required. His new rider requested such, and he was obliged to answer him. Tonight, the dread dove beneath the waves.
His prey knew not what awaited them. For in their hubris, these false fleshy fools thought themselves safe on their ships as they tried to retreat, because they believed dragons could not swim. In fairness, most could not. The younger worms were not built for such, indeed few had ever been. But he was no mere dragon. He was Balerion the Black Dread, last of an ancient line dating back to when the world was young. And on this darkest of nights,
the pirates were meat. Tonight, the dark waters were cool against his scalding scales, plenty enough to dive deep. So dive he did, relishing in the chaos to come. In the water, his vast bulk was nigh weightless, allowing him to move thrice as fast as he would in the sky. Were his rider in the saddle, the pressure would have crushed him, but he wasn't. They parted only minutes before. His Targaryen was on land, preparing the ground assault, the pincer to clamp down on the screaming souls he would drive their way. There would be no retreat, escape was not an option.
it was the simplest of things to bring them low. Effortless, even. He'd slaughtered entire pods of whales before. This was nothing.
Long ago he had witnessed the doom of Valyria, when fire fell from the sky and his kin perished in droves.
Today, he was the doom of the stepstones. On a whim, he chose his first target, a great galleon pacing slightly ahead of the rest. Twisting in the water, he arched his massive body upward, tucked his wings into his sides, and propelled himself upright with a might flick of his tail. Even then, he waited until the last moment to open his titanic jaws, and crunch. The first ship had little warning before he grabbed it and ripped it under.
The second even less than the first.
The third none at all.
Again and again, he dove up from below and smashed their hulls open after another, tore apart their rudders, sundered their sails again and again and again to send sailors screaming into the water. Those that fell into the drink were naught but meat, fuel for the furnace. He dove upon them, ripping and rending, tearing and twisting, snapping them up like the snacks they were.
Soon enough he made a game of it, hardly deigning to dive at all, using his vast bulk and great scales to simply smash holes into the enemy ships. And when that grew boring, he turned his breath upon them, rendering them blazing pyres upon the sea.
Snap, snap, snap went his jaws. Crunch, crunch, crunch went their bones. Thump, thump, thump went his heart as his victims died screaming for mercy.
Arrows skittered off his armored scales and lidded eyes as he surfaced. He roared a low laugh and flung himself at another galley.
Only 2 living dragons in this world could hope to harm him. They were not here, and so he feasted.
Wood and gilded metal was no match for his jaws. He could have swallowed these ships whole, but that would have played havoc on his stomach. It would have also been boring. Instead, he took visceral pleasure in smashing their ships, mangling their meat, hamstringing their hopes until none remained. What fun! What fun! To smash and rend and rip and tear like this reminded him of the younger days, of the conquest, of Vagar and Meraxes, and fire and blood. The crab feeder and his triarchy believed he knew what a massacre was. Fools. He had seen the doom of Valyria. He knew what death was. This was not death. This was a game to him. A snack. How he longed for a proper feast. A proper pot of whales rather than these petty pups. He devoured nearly all of them, and sent the survivors screaming to what they believed was safety. The fools. There was nowhere in Westeros, Essos, anywhere in the world they could hide from him.
Caraxes and Seasmoke could have their fun. Meanwhile, his rider would finish what he had begun. His wings were heavy from the water and he likely would not be able to fly for a short while time, but he needed them not here. His body was weapon enough. His scales were like tenfold shields, his teeth were his claws spears, the shock of his tail a thunderbolt, and his breath death. He chased them from the sea, ripped open their precious caves and forced them to flee into the jaws of the enemy. By the time he reached his rider, the battle had nearly been won. After today, the stepstones would never again be a threat.
Today, he was their doom.
Balls of fire flew through the air as trebuchet catapulted their munitions at the enemy, the explosions from their landing throwing dozens of men off their feet into the air before continuing to roll on and mow down dozens more. Horses cried out in agony as they were killed by the hundreds as arrows covered in fire rained down upon the dwindling forces of cavalrymen, their cries of pain filling the air as they were struck repeatedly and their furs being lit on fire. It was chaos and anarchy on the battlefield as the commanders did their best to rally their men for another fight to try and save their way of life lest it perish with them. Loud grunting from the overwhelming number of enemy forces filled the air as they prepared to go out for a final assault on their enemies. Another volley from the front trebuchet filled the air and the men trying to simply survive were trying desperately to avoid being crushed and burned from the relentless assault from the large attack. Riding through the chaos of battle, a dozen men clad in plated armor rode to the fray to help their brethren, but the constant fighting had worn down on them. They were exhausted and running out of ideas, one of which a large portion of the silver-clad men didn't have faith in as they took some time to rest and recover. They're preparing for a second wave. Another man said, motioning to their enemies up ahead as they began chanting their grunts of battle once more. The large number of enemy forces were starting to converge and flank them. If that happened, it was going to be all over. Charge! One of the commanders commanded loudly as the incredible army ran forward with yells and cries of battle. Volleys of flaming arrows filled the sky and rained down upon the much smaller forces, killing dozens in a second. 3 days from now, I will be holding the love of my life in my arms. Naruto thrust his blade into the air, standing at the head of a mighty host. Imagine where you will be, and it will be so. Hold the line. Stay with me. If you find yourself alone, riding in the green fields with the sun on your face, do not be troubled. For you are in the embrace of the seven, and you're already dead. The men roared as one unit as they heard their prince's words.
You are all now brothers. So know that what we do in life echoes in eternity. Daemon shouted beside him, sat astride Caraxes. Form your ranks, Corlys commanded the troops. Shields, up, a commander ordered. Spears ready, Daemon shouted. Stand your ground, Corlys ordered them. Daemon smirked darkly. Men, ready your stomachs and eat hearty. For tonight we dine in hell.
Curly's cracked his neck. "This is where we hold them," he roared out, pausing to let his voice echo through the ranks. "This is where we fight," he declared boldly, his defiance bolstering the men's confidence in themselves, "and this is where they die," he snarled, the men bashing their spears and shields together in an echo that rattled the land, a call echoing out from the men as they took their stances.
One of the commanders raised his arm. "We return home with these shields, or upon them," he called out. "Earn these shields and spears, boys." The defensive line snarled out a single call. "Who?" Naruto narrowed his eyes as he gazed upon the charging enemy. "Remember this day, men, for it will be yours for all time," he roared out to them.
One of the commanders to the Triarchy rode out and advanced from the crowd of the fanatical warriors on horseback. "Westerosi men, lay down your weapons." Rather than allowing one of his leaders to respond, one of the men surprisingly with incredible aim if the royal members of the royal court were to admit threw a spear directly at the commander, killing him, where he falls from his horse dead. "Crab feeder," Daemon snarled out loudly, and the men get into their shielding position. "Come and get them," he roared out. When he made this statement, the horde charged forward, and upon seeing this, Lord Curly's raises his hammer up into the air. "Give them nothing, but take from them everything." Naruto gained a gleam of eagerness in his eyes as he turned his gaze towards the rushing army of the Triarchy. "From here on, this battlefield belongs to us," he stated. The troops he commanded stood in line with one another, shoulder to shoulder, massive shields covering their fronts, and the spears that many held gleamed in the growing darkness, a message about to be sent like no other. With his own spear, Naruto planted it firm and stood tall before the line of troops, a beacon of strength and pillar of hope. And then his voice rose, a cry filling the air that shook the hearts of the scared and fearful. "Molen Labe!" Naruto roared out.
"Molen Labe!" the army called out, the spearmen pounding their weapons onto the hard ice at their feet. "Molen Labe!" Naruto roared out, once again smashing his own spear into the packed mud-covered ground.
"Molen Labe!" the small army shouted once more, the spears pounding into the sand and mud once again as they chanted the call, the declaration echoing across the land.
"What does that mean?" Lenore questioned curiously.
"It's High Valyrian," Naruto chuckled, keenly aware of how exposed his kin felt despite sitting in his own saddle. He knew the boy would much rather be in the air with Seasmoke, rather than down here on the ground with their troops and the rest. A statement of defiance, meaning, "Come and take them." In layman's terms, same as what our fathers have been telling our enemies. He shrugged when the boy balked. "You would know this if you had continued your studies in the language, cousin." "Take what, exactly?" said cousin asked curiously.
He smirked. "Our weapons, our freedom?"
Even as the screaming slavers came racing their way, hounded by Balerion and the dragons, they were ready.
Some plucky soul actually dared to shoot at him as they ran. Naruto caught the crossbow bolt in his hand. "Always loved crossbows," he grinned, considering the barbed shaft. "Never used 'em myself. They take too long to reload. I, on the other hand?" He whirled and flung it back at the unlucky archer, skewering them in the face. Their corpse pitched back. The others balked.
They were still balking when Balerion swooped down out the clouds and landed beside him.
"Go ahead," he crooned darkly at them. "Run for it, more fun for us."
What followed could be summed up in 3 words.
Fire and blood.
Dragons do as they please.
Dread. Of dragons and kings?
Naruto looked down on the men kneeling before him, 4 in total, each beaten and bloodied beyond belief.
"This is them," he asked his father as he crossed his arms over his chest.
Daemon swaggered past him with a scowl. "All 4 of the bloody bastards, we made sure of that. I had to agree with my brother on one thing, and as such wanted to present them to His Majesty alive and well so as to answer for their crimes of piracy and theft from the crown of Westeros, among other things."
Other things, he said, as though Westeros wouldn't be happy to see these men dead. No matter, their ends would come soon enough.
Good, I have no doubt that Uncle Viserys will be pleased to see our enemies kneeling before him, the heir to the Iron Throne remarked. It should make for quite the spectacle. Well, at least one of us is optimistic. Daemon muttered before scowling towards his son, better you than me at least. So melodramatic. Meh, you just need to get laid. Naruto snorted as he walked off. Try it sometime, does wonders.
No doubt that Hightower girl of yours beckons you to her chambers soon as we return, Daemon stated, one hand on Dark Sister's hilt as he followed.
Heat rushed to Naruto's face, forcing him to shake his head. I'd rather not bother Alicent until we attend to all this courtly business. Rhaenyra is still sour at you, is she? Daemon huffed out as he followed his son back to a tent, 20 guards surrounding the men they took as prisoner, their swords on hip and ready to be drawn if need be. More than one saluted, only to be waved aside. Their spectacle in the stepstones had won their loyalty, if nothing else.
Yes. And I have no reason as to why she has been like she has, Naruto said as he plopped down into a seat across from his father.
His sire hummed noncommittally. Something told him he knew more than he was letting on.
If he did, he was in no hurry to reveal it.
What do I have to do to gain her back? Not that I don't love her, she's one of the people that I hold most dear. It's just, he shook his head and flung up his arms. Gah, she baffles me. Women, Daemon grumbled. Tell me about it, Naruto groused. So, before we continue down a discussion that will surely end up with us losing both our cocks, I must know, why her? Daemon said as he looked to his son, his pride. Naruto blinked. You've lost me, he answered honestly.
Alicent, the Hightower girl, why her, and why not Rhaenyra? He asked again. Oh, alright, I see where you're going with this. Naruto sat straighter with a rueful laugh. So, obviously you don't like Otto. Well, trust me when I say there is something off about him. And I don't mean that in the manner that he keeps secrets, I mean legitimately off with his methods, he said as he looked at his sire. Daemon snorted. Of course there's something off with him, you'd have to be a fool not to notice it. Naturally, I took note of how he behaved long before the tourney actually took place and Uncle Viserys sent you here.
I've seen it for years, I'm just glad you aren't a blind fool to his ways like so many others are. Daemon said pointing to his son, so, the Hightower girl, she got you into her bed, she seduced you I take it. So close, and yet OS far.
Not quite, he coughed into a fist. If anything, I was the one doing the seducing. At least you admit it, Daemon snorted. His boy took after him in that regard, but he had never bedded whores, or noble women alike. In fact, he had absented away from women, waiting and hunting down ones he saw fit to bring to his chambers. From his own knowledge, the Hightower girl was the first and only woman he bedded. He was strangely proud of that, but still concerned. Be careful with her, she has your child in her belly. One wrong move on her part and I'll end her.
Oh please, Naruto retorted. Alicent doesn't have a single ambitious bone in her body.
And pray tell, how do you know that? Daemon scoffed.
She reads to Uncle Viserys those stories you used to read me when I was a boy, those same stories she told to great Uncle Jaehaerys before he died. Steepling his fingers, he stared at the dirt floor for a moment, trying to compose his thoughts before rallying. She's always so happy whenever you're around to see us together. She even told me she admires the way you do things, how you're not one to shy away from what truly must be done, rather than her father. I am sensing a bit more to this story, the Rogue Prince stated.
A little? I will admit her hair is attractive to me in certain lights. Naruto smiled, but no. It's the fact she told me she doesn't care for being a queen or anything more than someone we can call friend. She just wants to be there for me, and I respect that kind of honesty. He had actually used Kurama's negative emotion sensing to see if she was lying, but surprisingly, she wasn't.
Now that, I can actually find admirable. Demon hummed as he tilted his head a bit in appreciation for the girl. So, you vetted her, knocked her up with your bastard, and so now I assume you plan to marry her.
If all goes according to plan, hopefully before our child is born, he admitted, but I am also hoping to mend the bridge between me and Rhaenyra before anything else.
Yes, hopefully. Demon sighed as he sipped on some wine he poured for himself. You know, if Otto were to die, I don't think it'd be a bad thing for you to be named Hand. Naruto ventured. His sire paused, considered, then frowned. I'd rather not. As long as Otto is in a place of power, then it'd be impossible. He shook his head. Naruto wasn't willing to relent so easily.
Well, when I become king, I'm making you my hand. I trust you more than I do Otto, he insisted. I may respect Otto for his desire to keep the realm stable, but his sheer lack of faith in those who see what needs to be done is what sets red flags off in my head.